It's been 2 years since Multiversus became playable by anybody when it entered open beta in 2022. But since then, the game was, in what I believe is unprecedented, completely delisted so that it could go back into development and come back in what is supposed to be its final release form. Saying that its final release is kind of strange to say because this is a free-to-play live service platform fighter. And if you don't know what that is, just think Smash Brothers. Multiversus was very successful upon initial release, and to be completely honest, I really liked the game. I think it's a very interesting proving ground because, as I've said many times, these sorts of projects can be well done and terribly done. I'm talking about these free-to-play and live service things. And I felt that Multiversus was on the good side, especially because it was experimenting in a genre that I think can benefit from the increased player base and exposure that something like free-to-play can bring, that being fighting games, and especially a 2v2 fighting game. I mean, there's still plenty of 1v1ing to be done, but it wants to promote 2v2. By being this crossover platform fighter set in the Warner Brothers universe, it was positioning itself by using different IPs and iconic characters in order to sell a casual, no barrier of entry fighting game that anybody could join into and have a lot of fun. And with that success, it slowly went into that night as it then was delisted and came back. In that time, a lot of Multiversus has changed. From its engine to the fundamental mechanics that back the game, some of these changes are bigger than others, and there are very mixed opinions from different parts of the community on if these changes are good or not. In my opinion, a lot of what Multiversus is doing here upon its return is very good, and at the core you have a very fun game with tremendous potential as the base of a platform to build out a fighting game and its community. And Multiversus today, to summarize it the best I can, basically has a control system like Smash Brothers, including aerial air dodges with directional movement, and 2 primary attack buttons, a normal attack, a special attack, and being able to hold or to flick the stick in order to do smash attacks or charge attacks. You win by knocking your opponent off of the stage, not by racking up damage. Attacking them simply makes them more susceptible to flying off the stage. It also now features a PVE or a single player mode that I think can be highly enjoyable, even if you just are afraid to play online or you don't like playing against other people. And it is overall a ton of fun, but also developed by Player First Games, which are much more competitively minded and would like the game to be, an actual competitive game, which Smash Brothers has always been competitive, but against the wishes of Nintendo in a way, who have not really put much of any effort into balancing the game or taking the community, including the professionals' opinion on it. So all of this sounds very good, but surrounding that, however, there's a lot of very interesting decisions that many people would consider downgrades, me included, from the beta, as well as some maybe sketchy monetization paired with some very generous non-monetization, I guess, just free things for players to obtain and ways to progress through the game without spending a dime. If you check the internet right now, you're going to see different opinions on the game, varying from "this is great, I love it so much better," to "I like it a lot, but there's some complaints," to "it's more bad than good," and then finally, if you dare step into Reddit, you will find people who are finding ways to print physical copies of the game in order to set fire to them and protest. If you've ever watched anything I've done here on YouTube before, you know that I am an eternal optimist. I really don't see the point in being a pessimist. So I'd rather say that there are problems with this game that are very solvable. And if they are listening to the community and they have responded to a lot of the feedback that has been given to them already within 24 hours of launch, this game has a very promising future ahead of it if it is well handled. But there are a lot of ifs, and that makes me nervous. So let's go from the good to the bad. I'm going to tell you why I like Multiversus, why I think it might be worth your time depending on your preferences in gaming, and then we'll move into the things I think Player First Games and Warner Brothers need to do for this game to have a solid future ahead of it. By the way, I'm Mugthief. Hi, welcome. So, the good. This game is very fun, and it is still fun to its core, and a lot of the changes that they have implemented have slowed down the game in case you played it back when in open beta, and that slower speed can be noticed, and they have themselves acknowledged that a lot of the community says the game feels too slow at the moment, although that could have something to do with some other broken settings. What a surprise, a game launching with broken things in it, huh? But we have some issues with the input buffer, and long story short, that does affect how the game feels to play. That slower, but still way faster than many other platform fighters' speed that the game has is because the previous time around, the game was very fast, but also very hard to read. And especially in a game that wants to promote 2v2 as a competitive mode, that doesn't really pair very well. The slower speed that we have here in the final release of the game is much more readable, combined with other changes that they've done, including making the characters bigger and having the camera zoom in, also with mixed results because it does zoom in way too much in my opinion. However, something like the camera zoom is easily changeable with some options in the settings. Please add more options in the settings. Now, that slower speed isn't as dramatic as some people would have you believe, and I really do think that instead it has been a change of the balance point of speed. Because the overall speed has been lowered, but you can definitely feel that certain characters, like for example Finn, is still almost the same as he used to be. He kind of feels very, very fast, but not out of control fast like I thought he could feel in the beta. And it's more noticeable in other characters like Harley and Arya Stark, they feel wrong. They feel like maybe it's just a little bit too slow for them to really execute their combos, and it's just not as snappy as it was before. The fact that some characters seem more affected by this in their own personal combos leads me to believe that everything has been touched in different ways to kind of rebalance how fast the game goes on a more per character basis on top of the more system mechanics that have been implemented. This is all to say that if the game functions like this now, it shouldn't be much of a difficulty for them to tune that speed with different settings and different ways of the perceived speed changing in the back end with a couple of updates. However, I think that the game before was going to be unplayable and unsustainable because the meta and the way of playing the game devolved into consistently air dodging in every direction all of the time and wave dashing or its equivalent all over the stage and fighting people in that manner. And it became very annoying to deal with at higher levels of play. It's not that, for example, which poured a lot of hours into the game, couldn't win in that playstyle. It's that it became much more tedious and less satisfying than something that could be built out from the current system, more based on careful reading, predicting, and reacting. So I hope that they don't course correct too much and go back to the dodge spam fest that it was, but there are other things in place here to change that. And before I dive in a little bit deeper into the mechanics, please keep in mind that overall, the characters that are in this game, if you are a fan of Smash Brothers or you've always been curious about this type of game, I think are very well designed and play very fun, very uniquely, and pretty much everything that the game does at a fundamental level is excellent. It is much better than alternatives, in my opinion. I know that there's a subsection of the internet that is not going to like this comment, but I think it's better than Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl, and I think that it's better than many Smash Brothers games. I still have a soft spot for Ultimate and, of course, Melee. Can't ever dethrone Melee. But from the character designs and the creativity and some of the ways that their kits work, down to every little detail of how every hit feels to land, I think that this game is really good and has the bones to be maybe even the best one day. Now let's talk about some of those bigger changes, although if you've never played the game before, I'm just going to be explaining stuff. The dodge meter. You now have a meter with 6 pips, each of them governing a dodge that you can do, and things like dodging into an attack directly consuming 3 pips of it. If you consume your entire dodge meter, you will enter burnout, where you can still use your dodge for mobility, but you have no iframes. You are not invincible during that dodge, meaning that you can get very quickly cornered and destroyed by your opponent. I think this is a very smart decision, and the fact that dodging can be used both as a defensive maneuver and as well as an offensive maneuver to either initiate with a burst of speed or to cancel into other attacks means that this meter can be used both in defense and in offense, and managing it and the risk reward of it is something that I think adds depth to the game in a very positive way. And if what I'm saying kind of sounds like a baby version of Street Fighter 6's drive gauge, you wouldn't be far off. A bit more controversial are things like hit stop, which is how the screen stops or slows down when you connect a hit, and depending on how strong that hit is, the time that it will be stopped for will be longer. Some of this hit stop can be a little bit too pronounced, and while it's there to facilitate that readability, to make sure that the person who got hit understands they're getting hit, by what, and what their defensive options are after that hit, and so that the person attacking also knows that they're hit connected and has that split second to evaluate what they're going to do afterwards. It is a little bit exaggerated at the moment, and it can lead to the pacing of a match feeling a little bit off. Some people say that the hit stop should go back to what it was in the beta. I'm not sure with that. Again, overcorrecting is not normally the solution, but I would tone it down about 30%. Other universal changes like the parry mechanic by neutral dodging an attack at the right time, I think also add depth into the gameplay, and overall, a good match of Multiversus today with its current speed, its pacing, and its new mechanics feels glorious to play under the right conditions, especially now with the rollback netcode. Could it be a bit faster? I think it could. Not too much, but a little bit more. But it does overall feel like a better game to me than it was before. And that is the most important part, playing the game, jumping in, and hitting your opponent, and outplaying them, and doing cool combos. And that's all here to more or less degree after all of the individual balance changes and system mechanics that there have been. The most important part of this is that the feeling of playing the game gets stuck in your head and you keep coming back for more. The other very big change that has been brought to the game is the single player mode, or the PVE mode rather, because you can play it in co-op. These are called rifts, and they are kind of like mission packs. Think of them as maybe simplified versions of event matches from Smash Brothers. They can have different mutators that fit each of the characters involved in the fight. They have additional challenges for each encounter of maybe beat this as a DC character, beat it as a villain, beat it as a hero, hit your opponent 10 times with an up special or something like that. They have gimmicks within the stages, and there are stages that are just mini games, things like break the target or pilot a tank and defend things, and it can be pretty fun. It has its own dialogue, even though it's not voiced for each of the missions, and even some cutscenes that bookend each of the little chapters, and grinding these out and upgrading the gems, which is a completely PvE thing, doesn't affect your player level or when you play multiplayer. Upgrading the gems by just playing this mode and getting random drops. Again, the random drops aren't cosmetics, they're just to increase your power level in the PvE mode, will allow you to get stronger and access higher difficulty versions of the same mission packs, which at the moment they want you to grind in order to unlock Agent Smith, the new character, early. The grind is a bit excessive, and they have replied that they are aware of it and they are looking to change it. What I'm saying is the PvE is actually quite robust, surprisingly so, and I'm sorry to ape a top YouTube comment, but as said in the very trailer for this mode, we got PvE in Multiversus before we got it in Overwatch 2. I say that with so much pain in my voice, for a reason. Additionally, when it comes to positives, and don't worry, I'm going to get to all of the negatives, all of the things that people say are worse than the beta, and all of the things that the developers have acknowledged in a moment, but I do want to finish off with the positives. The Battle Pass system that this game employs is just completely backwards in the best way possible. In case you didn't know, Epic Games, the developers of Fortnite, have one very, very big regret with Fortnite, and that was making each season pass pay for the next season pass. Because if that wasn't the case, imagine how much money they could make with the value offered in each season pass. Especially now that they're established at such a level that they can probably guarantee the sale of those for their season passes. But as they've said, once you make this decision, there's no going back. And in the case of Multiversus, you have a pretty long season pass with a ton of different cosmetics to earn. That is, well, if you played the open beta at any point, the first season's premium version of the pass is free, and it does pay for the next season pass. On top of that, even though maybe Warner Brothers is not the hottest property on the block, it is a pretty good property from which to make a crossover fighter. Sure, maybe Disney, so that you could have Mickey Mouse fighting Han Solo and Iron Man would have been quite a spectacle to see, but Warner Brothers isn't short on interesting properties and interesting things to pull from to, for example, sell a lot of different skins and cool cosmetics. And as we look forward to the future and the big bumps that the game might receive in player base or in advertisement, in buzz overall because of characters, things from Legolas and Gandalf to Harry Potter, that'd be a big one. things like Mad Max or Scorpion and Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat, there is quite a deep well for them to drink from, with the upcoming characters probably being things like Neo, Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory, and the Powerpuff Girls. I think that the combination of that with the game being very fun and the fact that a lot of those cosmetics which are important to people are quite premium, maybe not the most premium as I would most like them to be, but things like legendary skins in this game, which do cost more or less the same as they do in other free-to-play games, so around $20 unless you get them on sale or something, do come with quite different effects and completely different voiceovers and quips that you say to your opponents and teammates. Some of the cosmetics are things that you notice a lot, like your ring out animation when you eliminate somebody, or the announcer that you have during the whole game, be that in the main menu or during a match. Some of these are very ingenious and fun ways to add cosmetics that are completely optional into the game that I think could do well financially, or at least enough for the game to be sustainable. But for any of this to work, they have to fix a lot of issues. This post on Reddit has been doing the rounds as people have been collecting different feedback of things that are worse today than they were in the beta. Some of them have been acknowledged as bugs. For example, you can't access all characters, including the ones you don't have unlocked, in the training mode, which was important for you to decide which characters you wanted to play as, and also to get a better grasp of what a character does in case you keep getting beat down into the ground by them. However, there is also the lack of offline play, of playing locally with all of the characters unlocked, which was in the beta, and tournament organizers are very worried about that, so that's half addressed. But there are a lot of other things. The lack of leaderboards in unranked, I don't know if this needs to come back. I think it's more important for ranked to come back. No after battle damage reports, not knowing who declined or accepted a rematch. You can no longer play co-op versus bots, and especially you can't do that while having it count towards your daily challenges. The prices of characters have been changed because they have changed a lot of the currency system from the beta, eliminating gold and creating new currency systems. So now there's no more cheaper characters that we had before that used to cost 1,500. Now every character is 3,000 except the newest character, which in this case is Joker, which costs 6,000. There are no longer skins that don't cost premium currency. Before you could grind the non-premium one and have access to some cool skins. The toast system is not being used as much. There are some issues with how you use your character tickets and your battle pass tickets, forcing you to use those. Those are, if you bought the founders pack, you have to spend them instead of, for example, saving your tickets for the more expensive characters and using your character tokens for the cheaper ones. You are forced into using the tickets first. And then some other stuff like not being able to remove team colors, which is the shading that changes the entire kind of color of the character so that you know which one is on your team and which isn't. You can turn off the borders but not the coloring, which I personally would like to turn off the coloring, but leave the borders and maybe make the borders a bit thinner as well. The biggest one is probably the fact that you cannot change the input buffer, which is currently set to 30 frames of input buffer, which is like absurd. That's very, very high. And before you could choose to lower it or to remove it entirely, and that does make the game feel more snappy, so it is definitely contributing to the fact that the game feels slow. For me, the most important problem in the game at the moment is the fact that progressing through the battle pass can only be done via daily challenges, and you cannot gain experience for the battle pass or progress for something by just playing the game. You are more rewarded for waiting until tomorrow to get your daily login and to refresh your daily quests in order to progress through the game. And because there's no ranked mode for me to grind, the incentive to play normal, where at least at the moment some people speculate if there is skill-based matchmaking or if there isn't, I can tell you I have gotten absolutely decimated by some players who are obviously very, very good, but also have probably not done anything but play this game since it came out. And then I have made people rage quit by touch of deathing them, basically. So if there is skill-based matchmaking, I don't know where it is, but it's not satisfying for me personally to go into a mode and do that, especially if I can't gauge where my opponent is. So I just want ranked. And I would be happy stomping people and fighting to win in under every circumstance in unranked if there was a reward at the end. But right now, all we have is leveling the character mastery, which does have some benefits, but not that much. The fact that you don't receive consistent experience for the battle pass, or you don't have the ability to consistently farm character tokens by just playing more of the game, or even, which I think is pretty much necessary at this point, having some other currency that you can farm to buy exclusive skins or cosmetics for the truly dedicated, or ultimate mastery skins for the character that you are playing the most. Not having something to grind for matters. And while what should matter the most is that you just have fun playing the game, those incentives do help a lot in that additional motivation and in wanting to win every match. Now, the good news is that very recently, a couple of hours ago from me recording this video, which again, the game has not been out even for 24 hours, the Multiversus mod team has answered on Reddit that they are seeing all of these complaints, that they are compiling them, and that they are addressing them. At the top of the list is that gameplay feeling too slow, followed by things like the UI, the input buffer, the battle pass XP, the bots that are missing, the options to turn off the colors, the Agent Smith event being too grindy, the Rift gems being difficult to level up and feeling pay to win, the fact that to obtain 100% on the PVE mode, you have to play it in co-op. People don't like that. I don't like that either. And in general, a lot of things that are worse than what they were in the beta. If they are listening to this and they can act fast on it, I think that we're going to see the launch of Multiversus this time around stretch out a bit longer. And if they have, which it looks like they do, a good content plan to keep people interested in playing the game, we could be seeing the very first free-to-play fighting game that is truly successful and proves that this model is the way to get more and more people into the genre, in this case into the subgenre that I love the most, which is platform fighters. I would love nothing more for the game to be successful because, once again, playing it is very fun. And I originally recorded this video before they acknowledged the feedback and said that the first thing that they need to do is acknowledge the problems and tell us that they are working on it. But since then, they did. Originally, that was my reservation of telling you, hey, if you like how this game looks, I suggest that you go play it and get into it and have a good time. It might not last, but at least you can enjoy it now, which at launch is probably the best it's ever going to get. But the fact that they have now answered allows me to say, I love this game. I think it's going to head in the right direction. I can't know it, but I think it is. And we have a lot more Multiversus in store this time around. And hopefully I get to enjoy this game, and so do you, for a long time to come. So I hope I've warned you about some of the negatives that people talk about out there and my perspective on them, and also recommended a game to you that I think is incredibly fun that you're going to have a blast playing. In any case, I've been Mug Thief. Thank you so much for watching. An extra special thanks to my patrons up on the $1 patron wall. More info on that in the description below. And if you want more of my coverage on video games, from reviews, news of the industry, and of course my long-form essays and retrospectives, check out the channel, maybe even subscribe. And as always, I will see you again very soon.